There was a door on the third-floor landing of the house on Gladstone Boulevard, and the rule about it was old enough that nobody in the household could remember being told it. You did not open it. You did not stand in front of it. If you were carrying linens up the back stairs, you walked the right-hand wall, and you kept walking. And if you were new and you slowed down, somebody who had been there longer put a hand on your shoulder and moved you along without a word about why. Danielle Petrosyan had been in that house for 9 hours across 2 days, and nobody had told her the rule because nobody thought a piano tuner would ever have reason to go up there. She tuned the piano. On the second afternoon, with the bass strings damped and the room as quiet as a room in that house ever got, she heard someone behind the locked wall. She was 31 years old. She had a van with 280,000 miles on it and a payment of $211 a month and a storage unit in Independence that cost her $89 a month and held everything from her father's shop she had not been able to make herself throw away. 11 action models, 400 pounds of felt, a gold leaf sign that said, Petrosyan Piano, since 1971, which had hung over a doorway on Troost Avenue until the year she turned 26. She paid the storage unit before she paid the phone. That was the ranking, and the ranking never changed. Marvin Dietz called her on a Tuesday in the third week of October after the first frost had left the grass looking scalded. "You still doing house calls out east?" he said. "I do house calls anywhere somebody's paying." Gladstone, the big one with the porte cochere, 1912, maybe 1910. Marvin was 70 and read the year of a house the way other men read the year of a car. Mason and Hamlin A, not touched since 2017. 9 years. 9 years. Then it isn't a tuning, it's a pitch raise and it's 2 visits, and the second one is not free. I told them that. Did you tell them the pin block might be finished? I told them you'd tell them. She wrote the address on the back of a receipt, and then she asked the question she always asked Marvin, which was who lived there, and Marvin took a beat before he answered, and she noticed the beat. "Sarkisian," he said. "Concrete people. Concrete people. Big concrete people, Des." There was a sign taped over the intercom at Dietz & Son that said, "Out of order," and under it, in different handwriting and a different pen, somebody had written, "Since when?" Neither piece of paper had come down in the 11 years she had been coming through that door. Her father had called her Decibel when she was small because she shouted. In the shop, in the church basement where he took her on Saturdays to work on the Kimball, at the top of the stairs at 7 in the morning. Decibel with the middle chewed out of it. By the time she was 9, it had worn down to Des and stayed there, and her father had been dead 5 years, and there were maybe 40 people left alive who knew where the name came from. She loaded the van at 6 on the Thursday. The tools went in the case her father had used, black with a hinge he had repaired twice with the wrong screws. Tuning lever with the star tip and the long extension for grands, because you cannot reach the treble pins on a 7-footer with a short lever, unless you want to spend the day leaning over a lid prop and wrecking your back. 24 rubber wedge mutes on wire handles, and the 4 felt ones she never used and would not leave behind. A temperament strip, which is a band of woven wool felt you thread between the strings so that only the middle one of each set sounds, and which smells, when it is new, like a sheep that has been out in the rain and does not mind. Hers was not new. Hers was the color of weak tea. She had a tuning fork, a real one, a 440, which she almost never needed and carried the way other people carry a photograph. She had a phone with an app on it that could read a pitch to the 100th of a cent, and she used it about 4 times a year to settle an argument with a customer. That was the thing about her that people found either useful or unsettling, depending on the person. She had been born with the whole keyboard already in her head, every note nailed to a name, so that a car horn was an F sharp, and the microwave at her mother's house finished on a B flat that was 14 cents flat and had driven her out of the kitchen since she was 11. That was one half of it. The other half was harder to explain to people at parties, so she had stopped trying. Rooms had notes too. A stairwell had a note. A crawl space had a note. Stand in an empty grain bin and clap once, and the bin will answer you, and the answer will tell you how big it is. And after 26 years of listening to soundboards and cases and the boxes that houses are, she could walk into a room and know, without deciding to know, how much air was in it. Her father used to send her ahead of him into a client's house. "Where's the piano?" he would say, and she would stand in the front hall with her eyes shut and point. She was never wrong. He never once told her it was impressive. He told her to wipe her feet. The house was the third from the corner, brick and limestone, with a porte cochere on the north side and a slate roof somebody had spent a great deal of money on within the last 10 years. There was a pothole in the street directly in front of it, an old one with a scalloped rim, and every car that came down the boulevard swung wide around it without slowing, which told her it had been there a long time and that the city had given up on it, and so had the neighborhood. A man in a canvas jacket opened the gate and did not ask her name. He looked at the side of the van, which said Petrosyan in 6-inch letters and tuning and rebuilding under that, and waved her through, and she understood that a name painted on a vehicle was as good as a badge to a certain kind of man. The woman who let her in the side door was 68 and built like a fire hydrant, and introduced herself as Verna Stubblefield. "You're early," Verna said. "I'm on time." "Nobody's on time." Verna took her coat off a hook, put it back, and then took it off again, and Danielle understood that this was a person who had been running a house for so long that her hands moved before her decisions did. "Front room. Don't touch the curtains. They're older than me and they're rotten." "You want coffee?" "After." "After," Verna said like it was a foreign custom she had heard about. The front room ran the width of the house. The furnace had come on for the season sometime in the last week, and the whole floor still carried the particular dry burn of a furnace working the summer dust out of ducts that had sat idle since March, which is not a good smell and is not a bad one, and is exactly what October is in a big old house in Missouri. The piano was under the north windows where it should not have been, because north windows in that part of town leak cold, but at least it was not over a register. Mason and Hamlin, Model A, 1926. 6 feet and 2 inches of Boston-built parlor grand with a tension resonator in the belly and a case finish that had gone the color of dark honey and crazed all across the lid in a fine web, the way old varnish does when it has spent 80 years in front of a window. She stood in the doorway with her hand still on her case, and she did not go to the piano first. She went to the room. 11 steps to the far corner, counting. She clapped once, waited, clapped again. Verna watched her from the hall with an expression that Danielle had seen on 100 faces and had long ago stopped explaining. "Plaster over lath, not drywall," Danielle said. "You've got about a foot of air under this floor before you hit the joists, and there's a return duct running under the middle of it that somebody blocked off. That's why this end of the room is cold, and that end isn't." Verna's expression changed a little. "There's a radiator behind that chair," she said. "There's a radiator behind that chair, and it isn't doing anything. It's got air in it. It'll knock all winter, and everybody will say the house is settling. The house is settling. The house is fine. Your radiator's got air in it." Verna looked at the chair for a while. "You want that coffee now?" "After," Danielle said. Then she went to the piano and opened the lid and looked in, and the first thing she said out loud, to nobody, was a word her father would have smacked her for. The instrument was 51 cents flat across the middle. Not evenly, which would have been merciful. The bass had held better than the treble, the way it always does, so the piano had gone sour in a curve, and the fifth octave was a mess of half-dead unisons where somebody had shoved a tuning pin in 8 or 10 years ago, and then never come back. 9 years without a visit does that. 9 years of Kansas City humidity going from 30% in February to 80 in July, and back again, 40 times over, while 180 strings pull with about 18 tons of load on a wooden block that is only holding them by friction. She got out the pencil, and the graphite came off on the side of her right hand, the way it always did, and stayed there for the rest of the day and half of the next one. "How long?" Werner said from the doorway. "Today is the rough pass. It'll drift by tomorrow morning. Tomorrow is the real one, and even that isn't the last one, because when you bring a piano up 50 cents, the plate flexes and the whole thing keeps moving for a month. You want this instrument right? I come 3 times. 3! 3! That's a conversation," Werner said, "and it isn't going to be with me." At 4 in the afternoon on that first day, a man came into the front room and stopped 4 feet inside the door and looked at the piano rather than at her. He was in his 40s and heavy through the shoulders in a way that was work and not a gym, and his jacket had a fine grey dust worked into the collar and the crease of the elbow, the kind that never comes out because it is not dirt, it is Portland cement, and it goes into fabric like flour into a wet hand. "You're the tuner," he said. "I'm the tuner." He nodded at the piano. "How bad?" "Bad." "Say it again." She said it again, and she added the number, and she watched him take the number in, and she noticed 2 things in the space of about 6 seconds, and she filed both of them without meaning to. The first was that he had turned his body slightly as she started to speak, so that his right side came around toward her. Not much. 6 or 7 degrees, the way a man might shift his weight. The second was that he had asked her to repeat a one-word answer in a quiet room from a distance of 4 feet. 3 visits? He said. 3. Will it be worth it? It was worth about $40,000 in 1926 money, and it's been treated like a table for 9 years. So yes. He looked at the lid, at the crazing in the finish, and something in his face went somewhere else for a second, and came back. "My mother's," he said. "Do what it needs." Then he was gone, and she had not given him her name, and he had not asked for it. She worked until 6. Friday she came back at 9, and the piano had already dropped 4 cents overnight, which is what a plate does after a raise. The second day is the good day. The rough pass is labor, an hour and 40 minutes of hauling 180 strings up toward pitch with the plate groaning under it, and it leaves your right forearm burning and your ears no better off than they started. The second day is when you actually tune. She wove the temperament strip through the middle 2 octaves so that only 1 string of each set could speak. She set the fork against the case and got her A. Then she started laying the temperament, which is the part of the job that nobody outside of it understands and that she had never once been bored by. Equal temperament is a compromise, and the compromise is this. If you tune every interval pure, the way physics wants it, you end up with a keyboard that sounds like heaven in 2 keys and like a car accident in the other 10. So you make everything slightly wrong. Every 5th gets narrowed by about 2/100ths of a semitone. Every 4th gets widened, and you spread the error around so evenly that nothing is right and nothing is unbearable, and that is the instrument that Bach and everybody after him wrote for. You do it by counting beats. 2 notes that are close but not identical pulse against each other, a wow, 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 wow in the sound, and the speed of the pulse tells you the size of the error. A fourth in the middle of the keyboard should beat about once a second. A third beats 7 times a second, so fast it stops sounding like a beat and starts sounding like a texture, and you learn to hear it the way you learn to hear an accent. She laid the temperament from the F below middle C to the F above it, checked it 3 ways, pulled the strip, and started on the unisons. That is the other half of the work, and it is the half that customers hear. 3 strings for every note in the treble, 2 in the tenor, 1 thick wound string down in the bass. 3 strings that have to be so close that your ear stops hearing 3 and starts hearing 1. When you have it, the note stops shimmering and goes solid, and it is the most satisfying thing in the trade, and there is no machine on earth that does it as well as a person who has done it 14,000 times. She got up through the 5th octave. The furnace had cycled off, and Werner had left for the market at 2. She hit A above middle C, damped the outer 2 strings, listened to the center string alone, and under it, from somewhere off to her left and above her, something knocked. 3 times, not evenly. 2 quick and 1 after a gap. She lifted her hands off the keys. A piano tuner spends her working life inside a box of sympathetic resonance. When you play a note in a room, everything in that room with a natural frequency near it answers you. A little. A wine glass. A ductwork elbow. A loose pane. A picture frame with a wire behind it. That is not a mystical thing. It is the most ordinary physics there is. And after 20 years you stop noticing it the way you stop noticing your own breathing. You notice when something answers that should not be able to. She played the A again. Nothing. She waited 11 seconds by the clock on the mantel and played it a 3rd time, and this time it was not a knock, it was a drag. Wood across wood, short, 4 or 5 inches, the sound of a chair leg being moved by somebody who did not want it to be a sound at all. She sat with her hands in her lap. Here is the part she would think about later on the nights she could not sleep. Her first thought was not fear, and it was not curiosity. Her first thought was that she had left a load of towels in the washer at home since Wednesday, and they were going to be sour by the time she got back to them, and she was going to have to run the whole thing again with vinegar, and vinegar was $1.69 at the Aldi on Noland, and she had not bought any. Then the second thought came, and the second thought was, that is above me and to the left, and it is close, and the wall between us is not thick. She got up. The front room had a doorway to the hall, and the hall had the main stair, and she went up it with her hand on the rail and her shoes off, which she had not made a decision about. The 2nd floor landing was carpeted and smelled of nothing at all. There was a runner worn to the backing in the middle, and a row of framed photographs going up the wall of the 2nd flight, all of them of the same 3 or 4 people at different ages, and one of them was of a woman at a piano. The 3rd floor landing was smaller than it should have been. She stood at the top of the stairs, and she knew that before she knew anything else, because she had come up 2 flights of a house whose footprint she had already measured with her hands and her ears, and the space she was standing in did not account for it. There was a door on her right, open, a bathroom with a clawfoot tub. A door at the end, closed, with the flat grey light of an unlit room under it, and a wall on the left, papered in a small green pattern, running 18 or 19 feet without a break in it. The house was 52 feet across the front. She had counted it in the drive. She put her palm flat on the green wall about 4 feet up, and she leaned in and she knocked twice with the middle knuckle of her right hand. The wall came back live. Not the dull thud of plaster over lath with a foot of insulated cavity behind it. Live. Boxy. A note with a body to it and a decay you could count. And when she hummed against it, working down from the A that was still sitting in her head, she found the note the space behind that wall wanted to sing, and it was a G. Low, about a G below the bottom of a woman's comfortable range, and a G down there means air. A lot of air. More air than a closet. She stopped humming, and into the gap where her voice had been, a man on the other side of the wall said something. She could not make out the words. She could make out that it was a man, that his voice was low and wrecked and had been used badly and recently, and that he said 4 syllables, twice, with the same shape both times, the way a person repeats a thing when he has been repeating it for days and no longer expects an answer. She went down the stairs faster than was safe in socks. Werner was back by then, unpacking a paper sack onto the kitchen island, and she looked up and did not stop unpacking. "You're grey," she said. "Who's on the 3rd floor?" "Nobody's on the 3rd floor. Werner. There's a bath up there nobody uses and a room at the end we keep the trunks in. That's the 3rd floor." She set down a can of tomatoes and squared it against the edge of the counter. "Why?" "There's a wall on the left at the top of the stairs, green paper, 19 feet, no door." "That's the old nursery side. It's been closed since before I came." "Closed how?" "Closed like the door's stuck, or closed like there's a wall where the door used to be." Werner picked up the can of tomatoes again, which she did not need to do, and put it in the cupboard. "Mrs. Sarkeesian passed in that room," she said. 2017. Vartan had it shut. Not talked about, shut. And I have been in this house 11 years, and I have never once had a reason to go past the 2nd floor, and neither has anybody else, and the girls who come in on Tuesdays know to walk the right-hand side of those stairs, and not one of them has ever asked me why. So that's the 3rd floor. 2017. 9 years since the piano was tuned. "There's a man in there," Danielle said. Werner went still, and it was not the stillness of shock. Danielle had spent her life reading the small physical facts of things, and she read this one and did not like it. Werner went still the way a person goes still when a thought they have been keeping in a drawer gets taken out and put on the table. "You heard the house," Werner said. "Old houses talk. Old houses knock. Old houses don't say 4 syllables twice. Miss Petrosyan. Danielle. Miss Petrosyan." Werner put both hands flat on the counter and looked at the backs of them for a while, the way a woman does when she is deciding how much of a thing she is going to carry by herself. She was 68 years old, and she had a granddaughter in Raytown and a Buick with a bad alternator, and Danielle would learn all of that later, and it would not make what happened next easier to think about. "You finish the piano, you send your bill to Marvin, and Marvin sends it here and it gets paid the same week, which is more than the hospital does. And you don't say that word to anybody who walks through this kitchen." "To who? Who am I not saying it to?" Werner did not answer, and the non-answer sat between them and did the work that an answer would not have. Danielle went back to the front room and finished the 5th octave and started the 6th, because there was no version of the next hour in which she picked up her tools and left, and she knew that about herself, and had always known it. Her hands were fine. Her hands did the job. Somewhere behind her ribs her body was doing something else, and it was going to have to wait, because in the treble the strings are short and stiff, and every pin is a fight, and you cannot fight a pin with a shaking hand. At 3:30 a second man came into the room. He was younger than the first one, and better looking in a way that had been maintained, and he came all the way in, and he sat down on the arm of a chair 8 feet from the bench, like a man at a friend's house. "You're the one making all the noise," he said. "That's the job. That's the job." He smiled. He had a good smile and knew the exact width of it. "Aram. The men call me Sunday because Sunday is the only day I ever turn up on a job, and by Sunday the work is done." "Danielle. Danielle." He said it back with a little bow of the head, and there was nothing wrong with any of it, and every hair on her arms was up. "How long's this take?" "I'm here today, and one more time in about 3 weeks." 3 weeks. The pitch moves. You bring an instrument up that far, it settles for a month. If I set it perfect today, it's out again by Halloween. Huh. He looked around the room, at the curtains, at the mantel clock, at the ceiling. Then he said in the same easy register, "You go upstairs." She had been tuning pianos for people since she was 19. She had been in the houses of rich men and of men who were pretending, and she had learned in her first year that the single most useful thing about her trade was that nobody in the world considers a piano tuner to be a person who is looking at anything. "There a bathroom up there?" she said. "Werner sent me to the one off the kitchen. Kitchen one's fine." Then, no. He held that for a second longer than a person holds a thing they believe. 28th is my aunt's birthday, he said, standing. 75. Whole family in this room. She played. Back when. So if you could have it sounding like something by then, that'd be worth something to somebody. The 28th of October is 11 days. Is it? He was already at the door. Then you'd better come back before 3 weeks. She did not look up until his footsteps were gone from the hall, and then she sat there with her hands flat on her thighs and worked out that she had just been given a deadline by the person she was most afraid of, and that she was going to take it. She packed out at 6:10. On the drive home down Independence Avenue, the light was already going, and an ice cream truck came the other way playing its tune at half speed, in late October, in the cold, with nobody chasing it, and she watched it in the mirror until it turned. Her apartment was the top half of a house off Sterling. The Cedillos lived below her and kept a 100-gallon aquarium in the front window with one enormous silver fish in it that their son had named Fillmore, and the pump put a hum through her floor at about 60 cycles, and she had stopped hearing it in her second month there, and heard it again that night for the first time in 4 years. She did the towels. She had no vinegar. She ran them anyway. Then she sat on the kitchen floor with her back against the dishwasher and thought about it like a job, because that was the only way she had ever known how to think about anything. Fact 1. The space behind that wall was real, and it was big, and it had a man in it. Fact 2. She could not prove that to anybody. She had gotten out her phone in the van and played back the 11 seconds she had managed to record on the landing, and the phone had given her the furnace, her own breathing, and a soft mush of nothing where the voice had been, because a phone microphone rolls off everything under about 200 cycles, and a wrecked man talking through plaster is nearly all under 200 cycles. Her ear had it. The recording did not. That was going to be true no matter how many times she went back with the phone. Fact 3. There were 2 brothers in that house, and one of them had asked her, twice in a friendly voice, whether she had gone upstairs. Fact 4, which came to her at 1:15 in the morning and got her up off the floor. The older one had asked her to repeat a one-word answer from 4 feet away in a silent room, and had turned his right side toward her when she started to speak, and had done it again on the second day when she said good morning to him in the hall. He could not hear on the left. The green wall was on the left at the top of those stairs. She went back on the Monday. She called Werner at 8 and said the pitch had moved more than she liked, and she wanted an hour that evening to check the temperament before it drifted past saving, and Werner was quiet on the line for 4 seconds, and then said, "Come at 7, the men eat at 7, and hung up without saying goodbye. Danielle spent the day on a spinet in Waldo, and an upright in a church basement in Brookside, where the coffee urn had a note taped to it that said, "Please do not touch the dial. Ask Jean." And Jean had apparently not been there since 2019. She did that work well. She always did, And it was, that day, the only place she could put her hands where they stopped feeling like they belonged to somebody else. At 6 o'clock, she stopped at the hardware store on Truman Road and bought a paint stirrer and a mason's line and paid $9.11 and got a receipt she did not need. At 7:05, she was in the front room with the lid up and the lamp on and the case open on the floor. The old varnish under the lamp gave off its faint, sweet ghost, the shellac and oil ghost that every 100-year-old case has when it warms, and she used it the way she used everything, as a fact about the room. She could hear the men eating. 4 voices, maybe 5, from the far end of the hall through 2 doorways. She could hear cutlery. She could not hear words and did not need them. She played the A. She did the thing a tuner does, which is play the same 4 notes over and over, loudly for an hour, and it is the most boring sound in a house, and after 8 minutes, nobody in that house is listening to it anymore. Then she took the paint stirrer and went up the stairs in her socks. The landing was dark. She left it dark. She got down on her knees at the base of the green wall and went along it with the edge of the paint stirrer, 1 tap every 3 inches, left to right. Plaster over lath on a stud gives a hard, dead click. Between studs it goes a little hollower. The pattern changes every 16 inches, tick, 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 boring, regular, one of the most reliable sounds in an American house. At 6 feet from the left end, the pattern broke. The dead click stopped coming. She got 4 feet of a different sound, lighter, quicker, with a tiny bit of rattle in the tail of it. Not plaster on lath. 1/2-inch drywall on a light frame, screwed, taped, papered over. Somebody had built 4 feet of new wall inside an old one, and they had matched the paper, and they had matched it well enough that in daylight from 6 feet away, you would never see it, and they had not been able to do a thing about what it sounded like. She measured it with the mason's line, thumb to thumb. 4 feet and 1 inch, and the seam ran up past her reach. Then she stood in the middle of it and hummed the G again, and let it die, and listened to what the space gave back, and she counted the decay, and the decay was long. She had tuned pianos in 150 rooms a year for 12 years. She knew what 1,400 cubic feet sounded like. This was not a closet. It was not a chase. It was not the dead space between a chimney and a gable. It was a room about 11 feet by 13 with a ceiling near 9, and there was soft material in it, and there was one hard, flat surface low down that was returning early, and the hard, flat surface was almost certainly a metal bed frame. She put 2 fingers on the drywall and tapped, twice. The wall answered. 2 taps. She tapped 3 times. 3 came back. Her eyes went hot, and she put her forehead against the wall for a second, which was the least professional thing she had done in 11 years, and then a light came on at the bottom of the stairs. "Danielle!" Aram's voice, up the stairwell, friendly. She was around the corner into the bathroom before her mind produced a plan, and she was at the sink with the water running when he came up the last flight, the paint stirrer inside her sleeve, the mason's line in her back pocket, pushing wet hands through her hair. "Werner said the kitchen one," he said from the doorway. "Werner's not the one who's been on her knees under a piano since 7. She shut off the tap. "There's no towel in here." "There's no towel in there because nobody uses it." I noticed. He was standing in the doorway with one hand on the frame, not blocking it, doing that easy thing with his weight, and he was looking past her at the tub and the window and then back at her. And his eyes went once, very quickly, down the hall to the green wall and back. She saw it. She made sure he did not see her see it. "Come down," he said. "You want a drink?" "I want to finish the 6th octave." "Nobody wants to finish the 6th octave." "I do. It's a Mason and Hamlin, and it's had a rough life, and I'm going to be embarrassed in front of your aunt on the 28th if I don't." He laughed at that, and it sounded real, and she went down the stairs in front of him with her back to a man she was reasonably certain had a person walled into the third floor, and she sat down at the piano, and she tuned for 40 minutes while he stood in the doorway and watched. That was the part she was proudest of afterward, in a way she never said out loud. 40 minutes. 16 unisons in the part of the keyboard where the string speaks for less than a second, and you have to hear the whole error in the attack, or not at all. She did not hurry, and she did not let a single pin slip, and she set every one of them properly, rendering the wire down through the bearing points so that it would hold instead of dropping in a week, which is the difference between a tuner and somebody with a lever. Aram Sarkisian watched her do it and got bored, exactly the way she had counted on, and left after 11 minutes. At 8:10 she packed her case, and Werner walked her out through the kitchen, and neither of them said anything at all until they were at the side door, and the door was open and the cold was coming in off the yard. "His mother didn't die up there," Werner said, looking at the yard. "She died at Research Medical. I was at this sink when the call came." Then she shut the door. She found Vartan Sarkisian at 7 the next morning on a job site on Prospect, because Marvin Dietz kept a card file going back to 1978, and one of the cards said Sarkisian Concrete, and the yard address was 30 years out of date, but the number rolled to a dispatcher who told her, without being asked twice, where the pour was. It was 38 degrees. There were insulating blankets rolled at the edge of a slab, and a man walking a screed and a ready-mix truck backing in with its chute swinging, and Vartan was standing at the corner of the form with a foreman who was 61 years old and had a beard like a hedge. She walked up onto the mud in shoes that were wrong for it and said his name. He turned around and the foreman said something to him, and he did not catch it, and she watched him not catch it. "You're the tuner," Vartan said. "My name is Danielle Petrosyan, and I'd like 90 seconds. 90 seconds, said the foreman, delighted. Hovseptashjian. They call me 90 Day because I have never once in 40 years told a customer a job would take more than 90 days. He put out a hand like a work glove. It has never been true. Hovsep. Vartan. It has never been true, Hovsep said happily, and went away down the form. Vartan looked at her. He had not moved his feet, but he had come around, that same 7 degrees, so that his right ear was toward her, and now that she knew what she was looking at, she could not stop seeing it. "You should stand on my other side," she said. Everything in his face closed. "Say it again." "No," she said. "You heard me the first time because I'm on your right. That's the whole point. I need to tell you something and I need you to hear all of it, so I'm going to stand here and you're going to let me." There was a stretch of about 4 seconds where she understood, in a clear and unhurried way, that she had made the kind of mistake you do not get to make twice with a man like this, and she found she was thinking about her father's tool case and whether her mother would know to keep it. Then Vartan Sarkisian said, 1999. A blast mat came off a shot at a quarry in Sugar Creek. How much is gone? All the high end. Some of the rest. Then here. She stepped once to her left, so she was square in front of his right shoulder, and she said it plainly and without any decoration on it at all, because decoration is for people who are not sure of their facts. There is a man alive behind the green wall on your 3rd floor landing. There is a room behind it that is about 11 by 13. It has been drywalled over and papered to match, and the seam runs from 6 feet in to 10 feet in from the left corner. He knocks back when you knock. Your brother has asked me twice if I have been upstairs. Your housekeeper told me your mother died at Research Medical. The ready-mix truck's drum turned behind them, and the chute clanged, and Hovsep shouted a number at somebody. Vartan did not say anything for 11 seconds. Then he said, "The nursery side is closed. It's closed with 4 feet of new drywall. Aram had it sealed in the spring. There was a leak from the roof valley. He said the plaster was coming off in sheets and he'd have it done properly in the fall." He was not looking at her. He was looking at the slab and at the man walking the screed and at nothing. "I have not been up those stairs since 2017. "Why not?" And here it came, the thing she had been half expecting and had not let herself finish thinking, and it came out of him flat, in the voice of a man reading a number off a batch ticket. "Because at the top of those stairs the wall is on my left," he said, "and I would have had to stand there. And if I stood there and there was a sound and I did not hear it, then somebody would have seen me not hear it. So I did not go up." He had been told a lie he could have broken open with one afternoon and a flashlight. He had not gone, and he had not sent anybody, and he had let a man live in a hole in his mother's house for however long it had been, because checking would have cost him the one thing he had spent 27 years not spending. "How long has the wall been up?" she said. 11 days. "Then he's been in there 11 days. Vartan turned and walked to his truck and did not tell her to follow, and she followed anyway. "Not the house," he said when she got to the door. "Not yet. If I go into that house and take a wall down at 9 in the morning, my brother will know inside 4 minutes, and that man will be dead inside 6. Do you understand what I am telling you?" "Yes." "Then get in." There was a paper sack on the passenger seat with a hard-boiled egg in it and a roll, which was what he ate at 11 o'clock every working day of his life because of something wrong with his stomach that he had never had looked at, and he moved it into the door pocket without saying anything about it. The hospital deck was on Warnell, 4 levels of cast-in-place parking that Sarkeesian concrete had poured between April and August, and the 28-day cylinder brakes on the last 3 pours were due at the testing lab on the 1st of November. Vartan explained it to her in the truck, and it was the first time in her life anybody had explained the concrete business to her, and she found, to her irritation, that she liked it. Concrete is sold by strength, and strength is bought with cement, and cement is the expensive part. A mixed design says so many pounds of cement, so much fly ash, so much water, and the ratio of water to cement is the whole ball game, because water is what makes it workable, and water is what makes it weak. Every batch that leaves a plant carries a ticket with the mix number on it. Every truck has 90 minutes from batch to placement, and at the site, somebody with a hose can turn a stiff 4,000-pound mix into a soupy 2,800-pound mix in about 40 seconds, and it will look better going down, and it will be worse forever. "So you steal it out of the cement," she said. "You steal it out of the cement. 200 pounds a yard across 900 yards is real money, and nobody sees it because the lab tests the cylinders, and the cylinders are made at the site by the man from the lab, and if the man from the lab is yours, he makes them out of the good truck. And Wendell Cropsey is the man at the plant. Wendell Cropsey has run my batch plant for 19 years, and he prints 2 tickets, one for the job and one for a drawer in his kitchen. He told me once at a Christmas thing, and I laughed at him." Vartan pulled up on the 2nd level of the deck and shut off the engine. "He is a careful man, and he was not careful about who he told he had a drawer. Your brother wants the drawer. My brother wants the drawer, and my brother has had 11 days to not get it, which is why the man is still alive, and I would like you to understand that this is the only reason." She said, "There's a faster way to prove it than the drawer." He looked at her. "You said the bad pours are the ones with too much water. Water that's added at the site goes in from a hose at the truck, so it isn't even, so the top of the slab bleeds, and the paste goes weak right under the surface, and it delaminates. It comes apart in a sheet about 1.5 inches down over the top mat of rebar. That takes a year to show." "It takes a year to show to your eyes," she said. "It doesn't take a year to show to a chain." They bought the chain at a farm store in Grandview, 4 feet of 3/8 inch, and she made a drag out of it with a piece of conduit and a hose clamp. And they went back at 9 that night when the level was empty and the lights buzzed on the ballasts at 120 cycles, which was a B-flat almost 2 octaves under middle C, and which she was going to hear in her sleep for a week. She walked the deck, dragging the chain behind her. Sound concrete gives a bright ring, a churr, a hard scatter of little impacts, and nothing under it. Delaminated concrete gives a drum. It is not subtle once you have heard the difference, and any inspector in the country can be taught it in 20 minutes, and it is also in every way that mattered to her hands that night, the same skill as finding a dead unison in the 5th octave. She walked it in lanes, 6 feet apart, and Vartan followed with a can of orange paint and sprayed a stripe wherever she raised her hand. She raised her hand a lot. By 11 o'clock, the second level had 41 orange stripes on it, and they made a shape, and the shape was not random. And Vartan stood at the ramp end and looked at it the way a man looks at an X-ray of his own chest. "Bays 9 through 14, he said. "Is that a pour?" "That is the pour on the 22nd of July, and the pour on the 5th of August, and part of the one on the 19th. He crouched down and put his hand flat on a stripe. 680 yards. "How many cars park on this?" He did not answer that one, and she let him not answer it. They stood on a concrete deck in the cold with a chain and a paint can and 41 orange marks between them, and she thought, absurdly, that she had never once in her life been paid for the thing she was actually best at. They went into the house at 2 in the morning. Verna Stubblefield opened the side door in a housecoat and did not say one word, and she had put a flashlight and a claw hammer on the kitchen table before they got there, which told Danielle everything about what the last 11 days had been like for a 68-year-old woman who walked the right-hand side of a staircase. Hovsep came, and a driver named Norik Bagdasarian, who kept looking at Danielle like he could not work out what she was for. Vartan went up first. At the top he stopped, and she watched him make himself stand square in front of that green wall with his left side to it, and it took him longer than it should take a man to take one step. He put his ear against the paper. The wrong ear. He did it anyway. "Nothing," he said. "Move." She put her palm on the drywall at the seam and knocked twice, and the wall came back. 2 knocks, weak, low down, near the floor, and she looked up and said, "He's on the floor now." He was on the bed on Monday. Vartan took the hammer and put it through the wall. It came apart the way new work does, in a dry white burst, and the paper tore in a long strip and hung, and behind the drywall there was a stud frame with nothing in the bays, and behind that was the original door, painted shut, with a bar of 2x4 screwed across it into the casing. Norik got the bar off with a pry. The door came open against something soft, and Vartan swore in a language Danielle did not speak, and the flashlight went in ahead of him. Wendell Cropsey was 52 years old and had run a batch plant for 19 years and had lost, she would find out later, 26 pounds. He was on the floor between the bed frame and the wall with a wool blanket over his legs. 7 plastic water bottles stood against the baseboard, 4 of them empty, and a bucket, and a paperback with the cover torn off, and no light at all, because the window had been screwed over with plywood from the inside. His left hand was wrong. 2 fingers of it were wrong in a way that had been done on purpose, and had then been left for 11 days to do what it was going to do. He looked at the flashlight, and then past it, and what he said was 4 syllables, and he said them twice. And now that she could hear the consonants, she understood that what he had been saying into that wall for 11 days was, "I'm in here." Hovsep got him under the arms. That was when the lights came on downstairs. What followed took about 19 seconds, and Danielle could never put it in the right order. Aram came up the second flight fast with a pistol out, and a boy behind him named Dickie Morsey, 29, who had never done anything worse than break a windshield, and Dickie fired first, from the stairs, at nothing, because he was frightened, and the round went into the newel post and threw a splinter of oak 6 inches into Norik Bagdasarian's cheek. Norik went down screaming with his own gun still in his waistband. Hovsep Tashjian took the second round through the hip and sat down against the doorframe with a look of tremendous surprise and said in a conversational voice, 90 days. The landing light blew out. Vartan had shot it, or somebody had. Then it was dark, and there was plaster dust hanging in the air so thick it was in her teeth. And there was the ringing. Everybody in that hallway had just been inside a series of unsuppressed gunshots in a plaster stairwell, and every one of them was, for the next several minutes, functionally deaf. That is what nobody puts in the films. The sound does not clear. It sits on top of your hearing like a hand. Vartan Sarkisian was down on one knee at the corner with his back against the wall and his good ear pointed at a bathroom door, and his brother was not in the bathroom. Danielle crawled to him over the broken drywall and put her mouth against his right ear. 2.5 feet to your left, she said. Low. He's under the rail on the top 3 stairs, and he's about to come over it. She knew because she had heard him, and she had heard him because of the one thing about her that had never been useful for anything except pianos. Under the ringing, a man's shoe had come down on the 4th stair from the top, and that stair had a loose tread, and it spoke with a small dry crack at about 700 cycles, and she had gone up and down that staircase 4 times and knew every board in it by name. Vartan moved left and fired twice, and the second one took his brother through the throat. Aram Sarkisian did not die well or quickly. He died on the landing of his mother's house, making a noise Danielle heard for years afterward whenever a hose was running, and his brother knelt in the plaster dust and held the back of his head off the floorboards until he stopped and said nothing to him, and did not close his eyes for him either. Dickie Morsey had dropped his pistol on the stairs and sat 3 steps down with his hands on his head, crying, 16 years old in every way but the paperwork. Don't, Danielle said. Vartan looked up at her. You've got a man with 2 fingers ruined and a foreman bleeding out of his hip, and I'm not leaving here having watched you shoot a kid on his hands and knees, she said. Don't. He looked at her for a long moment, and then he stood up and took the boy's pistol off the stair and put it in his coat, and said to Dickie Morsey, Go and open the gate for the ambulance and stand in the street where they can see you. And the boy went. At 5:10, she sat on the bottom step of the back stairs with a mug of Werner's coffee going cold in her hands, and Vartan sat down 2 steps up on her right, which was his wrong side, and he did it anyway. There was blood dried along his jaw and a cut behind his left ear where a piece of the newel post had caught him. Sit still, she said. She turned his head with 2 fingers under his chin, the way you turn a hammer to look at the felt, and she cleaned the cut with a wet cloth, and neither of them said anything for a while. Behind his ear the skin was ridged and shiny in a fan shape from the old quarry blast, 27 years of a thing he had never once let anybody look at, and she looked at it, and she did not make a single sound about it, and he let her. Nobody has done that, he said. I know. Ask me something. Does it whistle at night? He laughed at that, 1 syllable of it, and then the laugh came apart in the middle, and he sat with his hands hanging off his knees and let it go. Every night since 1999, and in a quiet room, it is the loudest thing in the world. What note? He stopped laughing. I don't know, he said. What do you mean, what note? I mean I can find it, she said. Not fix it. Find it. And then you'd know what it was, and it would stop being a thing that happens to you and start being a thing you have. He put his hand over hers, over the cloth, over the scar, and held it there. The kitchen clock said 5:20, and the frost was on the yard, and the furnace came on with its dry burn, and she stood up first, and he stood up after her, and neither of them said the thing out loud. He turned off the light at the bottom of the stairs. She went up ahead of him, and at the top of the second flight, he said her name once. The whole of it. The way he had heard her say it on the mud at Prospect, and she turned around, and that is where the door closed. Wendell Cropsey kept the fingers. He kept the drawer, too. On the 4th of November, a city inspector named Cheryl Bandy walked the second level of a parking deck on Warnell with a chain drag and a clipboard, and by December the bays between 9 and 14 were fenced with orange plastic, and the demolition permit was posted on the fence, and Sarkeesian Concrete tore out its own work at its own cost, 680 yards of it in the coldest week of the year. Hovsep Tashjian walks with a cane now and tells everybody the recovery will take 90 days. On a Saturday in the middle of December, Danielle Petrosyan came back to the house on Gladstone Boulevard for the third pass on the Mason and Hamlin, which is the one that holds. The green wall was gone. The whole nursery side was open to the studs, and there was a table saw on the landing, and Werner had opinions about the dust. Aunt Anahit Kalustian, 75, who had been told a version of things, stood in the doorway with the wrong coffee, made from the good beans Danielle had twice told her she did not like. "Play something," Anahit said. "I don't play. I tune." Everybody says that. In the hall, Vartan was on the phone. He was standing with his right ear toward the room, the way he did now without pretending he was not, and his voice never came up at all. "Denton Cheek bought the paper on the lab," he said. "He knew what my brother was doing in June, and he waited." A pause. "No, not this month. Let him get comfortable." Another pause. He looked through the doorway at her, and she was pulling the temperament strip out of the middle octaves, and she held his eye and did not look away, and she understood exactly what she was standing inside of, and did not put her tools down. "Ask him where he'd like it sent," Vartan said, and hung up. Danielle set the last 3 unisons in the 5th octave, and the notes went from shimmering to solid the way they do, and the old varnish warmed under the lamp, and out on the boulevard a car swung wide around the pothole. Nobody was ever going to fix. The piano held. If you stayed with Des Petrosyan all the way to the last note, tell us in the comments what you would have done at the top of those stairs. Then subscribe, because there is another woman coming next week, walking into a house that has no idea what she can do.